But as I saw it, I moved closer to it, and I got within 30 feet of it, and then I went into almost hysterics, not knowing, again, what is this? What is going on here?
All right. You obviously eventually you got to the point where you got enough composure to wrap this creature up in this blanket you had brought.
What I thought, the way my mind was working, was that nobody will believe this, and if there's anything I can do to preserve the body, so I can bring somebody back to help me and maybe save it, so I can show somebody. But that's what I tried to do. At first I thought about burying it. I thought about, trying to put it up in a tree. I thought about, digging a hole and covering it up. Probably halfway because I didn't want to look at it anymore. I didn't want to deal with it. And halfway because I wanted to preserve it. So I ended up saying, well, if I take this thermal blanket and put rocks around it on top of it, then I could somehow preserve this. Maybe if I put branches on top of it, animals wouldn't come and bother it. And I thought, well, maybe if I wrap it up and roll this thing up in this thermal blanket, I can, put it against, the hillside and pile branches or something alongside of it. So I decided to roll the creature into the blanket, and that was the first time I touched it, and basically put it somewhere where I could come back to it later. Well, while I was moving, I realized it was extremely light. The total weight was probably, 52, 55 pounds. And I looked for a place to put it. I looked for branches. I really couldn't find anything, so I thought, okay, I'll drag it back down the trail. And I basically carried this thing and looked for a place to hide it. And pretty soon I realized I had walked all the way back to my car.
So here you were at your car with this wrapped up creature. You did what? Threw it in the back of the car?
I threw it in the back of the car, got in the car, and sat there for about probably 10 or 15 minutes without doing anything. It was just kind of like coming back to reality for a moment.
Well, all right. So you drove straight home?
Well, I drove home fairly straight, as straight as I could considering what had happened. I had to stop a couple of times because I continued to get sick, and I actually got out of the car and tried to get a little fresh air. I did stop at a ranger station, but there was no one there, and I was hoping to, get some kind of help for myself. I felt dehydrated, my head was throbbing, my hand felt like I had, smashed it in a car door or something. And I was very tired, but I just kept driving after that until I got home. And once I got home, I felt like, again, I had come back to civilization, except for the fact that in the rearview mirror I could see this large, wrapped-up item that I had brought back with me.
So you got home and you put the creature, as I recall, in your freezer.
Yes. I started thinking about what to do with it. I was afraid, I was upset, I didn't know what I should do. I thought about burying it, but I was so sick I wasn't going to do anything at that time, and I thought, well, it's a piece of meat, I guess I need to preserve it if I'm going to show it to anybody.
Sure.
So the garage was right next to my car, and that's where my freezer was. And it wasn't in the house, it wasn't connected to the house. And I didn't want this thing to be connected to me. So I figured that, without thinking, I just decided that's where it should go.
And so in it went. You had a big enough freezer to store this thing, I take it?
Oh yeah, I had a large freezer. practically empty.
And practically empty. So in it went, and you locked up the freezer and walked away.
I locked the freezer, closed the garage door, and went into the house and tried to just relax, tried to calm down.
At this point, did you consider calling the police? Now you've got a phone. The Rangers weren't there, but you could call 911.
Yes, I had thought about calling the police. I had thought about calling everybody. You know, I had thought about calling NASA, the National Guard, anybody.
Sure.
You know, I didn't want this thing in my life. And I don't know how to explain the feeling I had, but I was so exhausted that when I could barely get in the house. I picked up the phone, I called my girlfriend, she wasn't there, I left her a message, said, "I'm home, call me." Very important. I called my best friend Gary, he wasn't home, I left him a message, I said, "Call me or come over immediately." And I basically sat there, not knowing what to do.
How long after you had brought the creature home did you remove the creature from the freezer?
Approximately 8 hours.
8 hours, huh?
Yes, I went in the house and rested, tried to rest, which was impossible. Tried to think of other things to get this out of my mind, but absolutely futile effort. Couldn't sleep more than about 10 minutes without waking up. It felt like a living nightmare. Finally, I actually got dressed thinking it would help me get tired, and walked back out to the garage and had to take another look.
All right, and so did you actually remove it or just look at it in the freezer?
No, I removed it. I actually picked it up.
All right, in the videotape, folks, I can tell you this. You see much more. In the videotape, it actually shows the doctor laying this creature out on the floor, unwrapping it, and then you did a cursory examination. I caught some on videotape. I noticed you opened its mouth.
Yes.
You opened its eyes and seemed to be trying to remove something from the eye. I couldn't quite tell.
Well, eyelids seemed to be quite tough. The actual tissue the muscle tissue was quite solid, and I was just trying to open it.
You've got to stay good and close to the phone, Doctor.
Okay.
That's
anyway,
good.
I was trying to open the eyelids, and the tissue that made up the eyelid and the muscle was very, very tough. The facial structure of this creature was very old looking.
Yeah, it looks
very
old.
Coarse skin, almost like a pig's skin.
Yeah, and you can see veins, clearly. Or what we would think of veins, anyway.
Right. The neck was exposed to all of the different muscles, and you could see subcutaneous veins and or some of the ligaments actually in the neck. Color of the tissue was somewhat of a pinkish blue at first. It's in the woods. But once I had gotten it home and it had been wrapped up for, well, probably eight or 9 hours and in the freezer, the color of the tissue changed a little bit. It became more of a brownish blue, brownish pinkish blue. It was definitely darkening, but I assumed that was possibly due to the freezer.
Yeah. After that examination, you wrapped it back up, put it back in the freezer.
Yes, I did.